Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for coming to our meeting today. We're going to go ahead and get started. I wanted to introduce Kelly McMillan to you. She works in the pediatrics department at Duke's School of Medicine. I'll let you explain sort of your job title and your function. But I actually met Kelly at last month's ISMTE meeting, and she has a really interesting job that sort of intersects with what managing editors do, but on the opposite side, working with authors. So I'm really interested to hear about what you do and your perspective. After Kelly speaks, we'll have Q&A, and we have a message for ISM from Research Square after that about a special event. So thank you, Kelly, for being here.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Brittany. No, it's been great to come out to the meetings and learn more about what you guys do, because that's really helped me with the authors and researchers at Duke. So yeah, first what I'm going to do is kind of talk about what my job is, because it sort of is a niche job that we've created, and then go over some of the data we've collected from our authors to figure out how to best address their needs. So I work in the clinical research unit at Duke, and basically the way these CRUs work is that every department has an oversight committee that is responsible for integrity, finance, compliance, quality, and academic productivity. We are the point before things go to the IRB, where we help them in the study development, and then after their studies are done, we try to encourage publication. And there's about 20 CRUs at Duke. Ours is unique because while there's a surgery, neonatology, we're everything to do with pediatrics, so we cover every department if there's children involved. I just said. And so pediatrics, we have about 200 faculty, and then we publish 250 to 300 papers per year. I think right now the Duke Pediatrics is #2 for NIH funding. So this is we're a big academic medical center, and it's really critical for our funding and support. So basically how my role came about is that because the grant environment has gotten so competitive lately, these indicators such as publication output have become more and more important in the assessments of schools getting funding. So I came on in about 2016, initially to help sort of figure out any barriers to publication and encourage output. We also at the same time took on a grant writing individual, Katie Authen, who helps them with that side of it. And just an example, even in that year, pediatrics had a T32 grant, which I'm not sure how familiar people are with those. But basically a K-12 is a grant for sort of individual training support of a clinical researcher, while a T32 is a department-wide grant. So this covers a huge chunk of our funding and support. It's gotten so competitive that actually in 2016, we decided to join forces with UNC and try to put a collaborative application in. And we'd had this grant for almost 15 years. And that year it still wasn't renewed, even with the joining forces. So it's a big deal. But we're still doing well, and we have a lot of, like I said, we have a lot of success in our department, so we're not too worried about it, but it is a challenge. So basically when I came on, it wasn't clear what I was going to do because we weren't sure what the needs were that the faculty had. So the first thing I did when I came on was to do a needs assessment. Which I brought some of the data from that initial faculty assessment that we did, and I can show you some of those sources. What's really interesting about this is because sort of in my networking, I've tried to reach out and find people at other institutions with similar roles to see how they're supporting and helping others. And I found the Center for Journalology, which is at the University of Ottawa. It's an interesting name, and basically I can kind of go over what they've designed. It was almost the exact same thing that I ended up doing at Duke, that they had already had going on, and they were doing research into developing these positions and trying to help expand them. So one of the key reasons for the need is obviously, as you're aware, the publication climate is changing a lot, and researchers are not keeping pace. And so there needs to be someone who's, and librarians have served this role, but not quite as individually as something like a department-specific publications officer. So the University of Ottawa, this was sort of their mission statements for what a publication officer does. And when I say publication officer, my title was science writer because it was the only thing in the Duke directory that sort of fit. But I think this is actually a better descriptive title. So to support researchers that conduct and report studies to ensure that it's published at the institute as clearly and transparently as possible with best practices. Help, and most importantly, help researchers to publish quicker and with fewer revisions and resubmissions for the best suited journal. The big driver of why they set up this Center for Journalogy was this guy here, David Maher, I believe is his name. He had done a bunch of research showing that even though he's a statistician who does a lot of meta-analyses, and he found there's a huge chunk of research waste due to the fact that people are reporting studies, but not in a way where they can be indexed and systematically reviewed. And the research Increasing Value, Reducing Waste is a great series from the Lancet that kind of goes over all the steps and where this process is. And they estimate that from the beginning of study design to publication, either due to poor study design, replicative studies, or non-reporting of studies, there's about 85% of research funding that's completely wasted. It came out to, I forget how many billions of dollars, but it's quite large. And so I'm a big fan of this initiative, and it's something that we're also pushing as we're, helping to educate researchers at Duke, is to use it as an opportunity to spread awareness about this and help them think more about publication at the start of the study instead of at the end of it. So I'll go back to our needs assessment. So this is when I first joined. We sent this out to all of our faculty. Out of about 250, we got 80 respondents, which is actually good. It's very hard to get doctors to check emails. So yeah, I think that's been one of the biggest learning curves in my job is figuring out how to navigate that. So the first thing we asked is, of those who need writing development assistance, what kind of assistance do they need? Obviously, the biggest one is grant writing support. These applications are becoming larger and much more challenging, and there's really not much mentorship or structured guidance that they get. It's all kind of just depend on who they happen to be working with in which department. Basic science and clinical research was about, 40%. I mean, this is because we have a very large department for that at Duke. And then the individual types of studies, so case reports, retrospective reviews. I don't need writing, which is funny because a lot of those people actually then put what type of writing assistance they would need later. And other. This other was interesting because it was one that I had left out, which was quality improvement studies. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with QI studies. It's a very unique type of study design. And the reporting guidelines are very structured. So when we get comments from peer reviewers, it's usually sent back because it doesn't meet the QI structure. Which I can show here, which is why I'm now working on sort of a curriculum and educational development specifically on how to write a QI quality improvement study. So some of the other comments that people put in was mostly about grant reputation and then document writing, and then also with having just someone else to look over manuscripts to see if they're on the right track. All right, so the next thing we asked was, what are your primary areas of interest for manuscript assistance? Editing the manuscript, so a lot of people are getting to the point where they're actually getting it out there and having, the skeleton of the paper, but they need some help with editing. Formatting is a big one. Manuscript submission was also a big one because I'm sure some of you are familiar with a lot of these instructions can be very confusing, and most, I would say, all of the faculty don't give enough time to actually, read through and follow those directions, which is a big reason for rejection or resubmission. I don't need this assistance and others. I believe the other was, some people just put in some odd answers, so. So then we wanted to know kind of how much time they thought they were going to need. In practice, obviously, this has been pretty different, but we can at least meet them where they're at. So not many needed more than 4, but kind of the big hit point came about 3 to 4 hours with the science writer, which I think is true. The problem is getting clinical researchers to give you 3 or 4 hours. So I started putting together what we call manuscript writing workshops, where I'd get 3 to 4 faculty who have a paper that's close to the end of submission to come in. I would try to get everyone to read each other's copies beforehand, and then I'd first give sort of a presentation on sort of submission guidelines and general writing tips, and then I would give them feedback, and they would give each other feedback on their papers. And this, I think, was really productive. The challenge is at most getting 4 people together in a room, I could get maybe 2 hours on their schedules. So it's pretty crunched. But the advantage of that is when they actually show up is that afterwards they're more engaged in the editing process. So they'll respond to my emails and they'll send manuscripts. And in fact, one of the things I've found is the biggest barrier for them to publish or even come to me for support is that people just aren't aware, no matter how many emails, flyers, things we put out, it's not, getting through to them. But we have a couple ideas on how to address that. Have you initiated a manuscript abstract that you did not take to publication? So I think this was the biggest reason that the department wanted to hire me as a science writer, was they knew that a lot of studies and research was going on that wasn't being reflected in the number of studies being published. So, and you can see this here, about 30% had initiated a manuscript that was not submitted. This one was really critical, a manuscript that was rejected but could be resubmitted with edits. And then this also is actually a key target point, which is I presented an abstract, but it's not been published to a manuscript. So we have a lot of people who are going to conferences, they'll do the research, they'll present a poster, and then they're done. Mostly due to time constraints. I mean, most of them at our department are physician researchers. So the more that, we can kind of handhold, the better we can get this research out there. So if you've initiated a manuscript that was not submitted, what was the primary hurdle to completing the project? Not having time to collect the data was obviously the biggest answer. Finish up the data and the actual writing the manuscript. So this was a big one I found when I met with faculty, that they are very embarrassed to submit, is they just don't like, or to admit, so they just don't like writing. And so there's so many other ways they can procrastinate things that they need to get done, that things just get put into a desk drawer and then never come out again. Finalizing the reference list, and then the editing and submission process was another big chunk. I think I put in the other responses. Yeah, some of the key other responses for this one. Data was not worthy of publication, project never finished, or data was not accurate, limited time and expertise to take publication. Obviously, that's one we want to address. This one is also interesting because we do have a lot of studies that, especially now with open access, where they're kind of having this publishing everything model, there's a space now for negative studies, negative data studies. And we really want to educate and get awareness out there, because that's part of the reporting waste gap, is that if you don't publish a negative study, someone else will redo that negative study. And then the other issue for worthy of publication, this is a problem at Duke, mainly because people have this mindset that if it's not novel and impactful to pediatrics as a whole, they shouldn't bother their time with it. It's a very competitive environment, and I've even gone to education workshops where senior faculty will say something like, you have to create a study that's going to be novel for external, but it's never discussed that it's okay to not be an external. There's a lot of really critical research that needs to be out there that faculty are doing, that, like I said, if they do the work and then they decide the data is negative or not good enough and don't publish it, it's waste. And then not initiating a manuscript. So these were some kind of things that I picked up over the course of the 2 years that I've been in the role that we found that people need help with. I also help with, like I said, for the IRB submission process, I meet with faculty because they are, they have a good idea of their study design, but they don't know how to word it in a way that makes sense. So I help with their kind of writing protocols in a more clear way so that it can get through the review process more quickly. CV writing, this is sort of a unique thing I've taken on, and it just shows the time constraints of these faculty, is that there is, let's just say they don't get to those positions because they're, you know, good at everything. They are very good at some things, and so they have earned the hand-holding that they get. And then compliance forms and documents, again, a lot of admin stuff that I've taken on because, like I said, it helps the department as a whole if we can help them with this. So these are my plans going forward based on kind of our initial trial of manuscript workshops and our needs assessments over the past year to see what we think is going to be best and most helpful in the year going forward. So as I mentioned, work on QI educational curriculum for junior and senior faculty. And I'm going to start to work on developing more expertise in the QI journal landscape and where the best places to submit are and what their requirements are. I'm also going to try to look into more open access funding support. Duke has several in sort of very niche areas of the library and different departments that are underutilized, mostly because faculty aren't aware of it or they're scared of open access, which is develop an open access curriculum. So I just got back from the SSP conference and there was a lot of really great, exciting trends going on. And I think one of the big messages there is that as libraries start to shift funding to support open access application, some of the smaller journals are probably going to shut down and it's going to be shifted over to more open access. So the faculty need to be aware of this trend and start to kind of develop an understanding of how to navigate it and sort of get past this idea that if it's open access, it's probably predatory or it's not worth my time to submit there. And then I'm going to work with the Center for Journalology to sort of develop more of this research education curriculum for no other reason than I think that it provides additional motivation for researchers to improve their reporting besides just, I want to get published. It's also kind of an ethical quality of science issue as a whole. And then the last one, which was the issue of the kind of spreading awareness that I exist, is that I kind of have to go, email's not going to work, announcements are going to work, I'm going to have to go meet them where they are. So I'm going to start going to division meetings, going to start tracking down people anywhere they have conferences and just kind of trying to spread awareness of this resource. Because what we're finding is that once people do know about it, it's very readily used. And yeah, that's it. So I figured I would kind of open it up to questions and conversations to see sort of what information would be helpful to you guys.
Hey, so I'm just kind of curious, like when people take you up on your help, what level of researcher is it typically? Like at what point in their career? Do you find that early career people are more willing to accept help?
Yeah, so that's interesting because I actually got the same response from the Center of Journalology where they thought it was going to be mostly early career researchers, but it was the more established faculty who were reaching out. The trick is finding ways to, like you said, be more open to it. One of those ways is to the manuscript workshops, because this is sort of, it's not saying, I don't know what I'm doing, I need help. It's sort of kind of slyly getting them to say, we'll help edit and give feedback, and then we can go in and address some of the issues. Because we're finding that even really established faculty have a lot of knowledge gaps that aren't addressed, mostly because doctors don't like to admit what they don't know.
So this seems like a really needed position in a lot of places, and it seems like you haven't found much of your tribe, so to speak, like in other places. What do you think can sort of move that forward in terms of like getting other institutions to invest in a position like this to help their researchers?
Yeah, actually, so that's a great thing they did up in Ottawa, which was the reason they got it up and running is because they did, with his statistical analyses, he was able to get institutional buy-in to support it. And now they're doing, they're putting out data on their success rates. So for me right now, I'm tracking how many manuscripts I help with, how many end up going to publication. Now what we're hoping with is that as that data accumulates, it will justify that position for more departments. But I think the challenge is just there's not evidence that, there's not awareness of the position, and there's not enough evidence to show that it's cost effective.
And one more question. So do you help them write their study protocol or design before they even begin research at all? Or are you solely on the sort of, they've got the data, done the study, and sort of finessing it into a manuscript?
I do, just because it happens that another aspect of my job is study review, which is actually sort of unrelated to the writing side of it. But usually I haven't been here long enough where that study has connected to the publication phase because of the duration. So for the writing, it's mostly focused on the sort of end point. Yeah.
So off the back of Brittany's first question, it sounds like you have a lot of work on your plate. Is it just you, or you're the group, or are there others like you, or?
I am the group.
You're the group. Okay, wow. And then I'm always interested in people's backgrounds and how they came to be in the position. So can you just give us a little bit about your background and how you came to your current position?
Yeah, sure. So I'm probably like a lot of you guys. I was in either research and medicine and then sort of shifted out into writing. I went to medical school at Duke and decided about in my second year that it wasn't a good career fit for me. And I was looking into what I sort of wanted to do long term. Before med school, I had lived in China for 2.5 years. I worked at Tsinghua University, where I was doing HIV research, but I found that I started spending most of my time helping them write manuscripts. And I loved it. And so I think looking into kind of what my passion was, it was there. So.
Hey, it's too loud. Hey, I'm Karen, and I am doing this very same thing, actually. So I'm part of the tribe at RTI Health Solutions. I just thought it might be interesting for you to know that this function is also new to Health Solutions. I'm the first new hire brought on, and I've only been in the position for 7 months to basically help our researchers get from the end of their study reports, to publication, because it's an important metric for us as well. So I just thought it was interesting. I was very curious to see how deep you're going when you're helping the researchers, because I'm actually taking study materials and writing drafts from them. So do you get that deep, or are you sort of just helping them once they've got like a rough draft, a first draft, sort of tightening it up and getting it really ready for publication?
Yeah, no, that's so great to meet you.
Yeah.
We'll chat later.
Yeah.
But yeah, so right now it's mostly manuscript phase, mostly because of the way that we're trying to reach out is through these manuscript workshops. So usually it's something that's pretty close to finished. And the other key target point for us is studies that have been reviewed, rejected with review.
Oh yeah.
So helping people to get those, and
Right.
there's enough of those
Resubmission.
resubmissions
Yeah.
that kind of fills my plate. But it's possible down the line that we will start getting to that point. Hopefully the idea is to teach a man to fish instead of fish for him.
Yeah, I'm doing that as well.
Yeah.
So we should definitely talk later. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one reason that this is growing lately, because I noticed this when I worked in China, is that for a lot of third world countries or developing countries, PhD students are required to publish in English language journals to get their degrees. And so what we've got in the past 5 years, there's just a surge of submissions at journals, and people in the US are feeling it. There's competition, and it's now not enough to kind of tack your way through and sort of figure it out. And I think that institutions are realizing this.
Hi, my name is Krista. I'm with Sage Publications. I was wondering if you could give me some insight, like what's the biggest mistake that publishers will make that trip up people who are writing and discourage them from wanting to submit?
I think usually what we find is actually it's the tone of the peer review feedback. And that's what I've been getting mentorship on, is like learning how to interpret what that feedback means. And a lot of times we get rejected manuscripts that the feedback, if you read between the lines, is positive. It means resubmit. But that message isn't communicated. They see the negativity and they think, oh, okay, the study is done. And so, they bench it. So I guess that there's some way to more clearly communicate, this has potential, but make these changes, or this has potential in another journal. Because I think a lot of publishers don't make that effort when they reject it to say, it's not a good fit for us, but address these things and it could be published elsewhere.
Right. Oh, I hate speaking into microphones. Forgive my ignorance, but is there a research methodology course taught in med school earlier in their graduate career? The reason I ask this is back when I taught English composition, we would hammer away at getting students to go to writing centers to get the help that they need. And this is very much like a writing center for professionals. So if it were pushed in grad school that you need to collaborate, if they saw the evidence that X amount of researchers get good feedback from publishers and then do not resubmit because they don't want to edit it. However, we have this resource here for you to use. You don't have to pay someone to edit it for you. You could actually use our department. You may be able to plant the seeds in the students' minds before they go off and believe that they are gods and don't have to have anyone help them out.
Yes, so much yes. The challenge with that is, so Duke is one of, I think, 5 schools that has a research year where students are taught pretty intensive research methodology. I didn't realize until I was working on the other side of that with faculty how little research education a lot of people get before they come, if they go to a traditional med school. It's really focused on the medicine, and so it is a lot of kind of figure it out as you go. And the challenge is that because there's so many established faculty and researchers who think this was how I learned, so this is how you should learn, that it's a very tough model to shift. But we are trying. And Duke actually has another great resource, which is the Gopin Writing Seminar, which, Dr. Gopin has a great book, which is called Writing from the Reader's Perspective. And this is the methodology I try to teach them one-to-one. I've been to the seminar, and the challenge is it's really an applied practice thing. You can't go listen to someone tell you about it. And so that's why we're trying to get them to come meet one-on-one and then practice doing those things.
Let me try and remember my question. Sorry. Oh, so it seems like from what you're saying that for most researchers, they sort of submit to a journal, they might get rejected. And a lot of that's probably, pressure on the journals. And even if it's a good research article, there's only so much they can publish. And then they get that one reject, and even if the comments are good and constructive, like you're saying, they're sort of done. Is that what you're seeing? Like they submit to one and sort of want to give up, or do they hit 2 and then give up? And I guess part of your role is helping them to find the right journal to try and decrease that sort of initial non-fit that may be part of a rejection.
Yeah, and I think it may be different working with, if it was a PhD department. I know they get a lot more training and education in writing and choosing journals, but I do find a lot of them, even at high levels, I'm surprised at, they're kind of familiar with 4 to 5 journals. They'll submit to one of those, and then if it doesn't look like it's a good fit for the other ones, they don't know what to do. So this hurdle of there being thousands of journals out there is just too big. So yes, I think that is happening a lot. And the other thing is that like I said before, the peer review tone is positive if you read between the lines, but a lot of the statements are so critical that people aren't always aware. And the other thing is that when they get that rejection or feedback, a lot of times they aren't going to their colleagues to ask about it because of this reluctance to sort of admit failure or weakness or, yeah.
How are you helping them select journals? Are you using any kind of resources there, or just Google searching and trying to find that niche publication?
Yeah, I've started an Excel sheet where I'm just trying to build my knowledge of different journals and have that awareness, and then going through their mission statements, the types of studies they have. I'm also looking at the journals that we have published in and kind of what types of articles are in there. But really, and I've even actually shared some of the Research Square resources with them that they found really helpful. But But a lot of it also is just communicating with them simple things like look at their mission statement, look at their author guidelines. A lot of faculty aren't aware that they're junior faculty more so that there are those types of author guidelines are there. They just, I know, because they're just, because what they do, they'll go through so much of their career and someone will say, oh, submit to this journal. And they'll say, okay. So they don't have to really choose it themselves. There's always someone to there's that word of mouth. But the problem is you then get trapped into only the journals that your department is comfortable and familiar with.
And then you spoke earlier about open access and how there's still a stigma. Is that the senior faculty? Is that the new kids too? How does that play into?
It is the senior faculty.
It is. It's only.
And it's definitely impacting the younger students. Because I do also give my presentations to residents and fellows, and invariably it will be one of the senior faculty sitting in there who will kind of give their input that's sort of unhelpful. And I want to say like, no, it's okay to not publish in that journal. So, yeah.
Anybody else? All right. Help me thanking Kelly for her presentation. Thanks, Kelly.